Welcome to your Daily Dose of Sunday School, episode 114. We're still on chapter 6 of R.C. Sproul's Reason to Believe. I Don't Need Religion. That's the title of it. And following along, we started talking about humanism last week, and we said man is not basically good. And following that argument along, we're addressing the question of don't we have to earn our way to heaven? A lot of people like to think that that's true. That isn't this supposed to be like the greatest prize, the greatest reward for doing what's right? And the Bible says no. It says that knowing God, living with God forever, is a gift. And in fact, even if it was the sort of thing you could work for, no human being would be able to achieve that goal. Romans 8:7. For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. That's the natural mind, the mind that is separated from God. That's what it means when it talks about us being in the flesh. And it says that we cannot submit to God's law. We actually have to be redeemed by the grace of God through what Christ has done, dying for us, rising again, giving us His Spirit, before we can begin to obey. So we're putting the cart in front of the horse there if we try to earn our way to heaven. But then the question becomes, if we cannot do what God requires, how are we held responsible? So we're told here by the Scriptures in multiple places that we're not able to submit and obey. So how are we held responsible? Well, there's two different sorts of ability, right? There's natural ability and moral ability. We have the natural ability to do things that honor God. We can pick up a cup of cold water and hand it to someone who is in need. What we lack when it comes to obeying God is the moral ability. So what's the difference? If I tell my kids that before bed, make sure you touch the roof, and then I got mad at them for not touching the roof, well, I would be violating their natural ability. They can't do that. So why would I command it? That has to do with natural ability. But let's say they were just the most rebellious children ever, and I'd ask them to do something, and they never do what I ask, to the point where they have such a strong desire to do exactly the opposite of what I say that it becomes very clear that their strongest desire is to thwart my will. And I could say in that case, they lack the moral ability to do what I want. Moral ability has to do with what you desire. Human beings desire autonomy. We desire to do the opposite of when laws come to us. We desire to do the opposite. It says stay off the grass. We might have even thought about getting on the grass, and now we want to do the opposite of what that law says. It has to do with moral ability. So Christians believe in free will as long as we define it properly. We are free to do according to our desires. If somebody absolutely hates peppermint ice cream, like my wife does, and I lay out peppermint ice cream and vanilla ice cream. And I say, okay, pick whichever ice cream you want. And I do that 100 times. I know exactly which one she'll pick 100 out of 100 times. Now, one could take that as evidence against free will, but it's actually not. One could say that this is an evidence of determinism, but it's actually not. This is self-determinism. This is people do what they most desire. Now, sometimes we're put in constrained situations where we have a limited number of options. But even then, someone puts a gun to your head and says, your money or your life. Well, you like your life, so you give your money. That's coercion. That can happen. But in every situation, we act according to the option before us that we desire most. And without the Spirit of God working in our heart, what we desire most is not God. And so this leads to other questions like, well, what about original sin? If we're born this way, how are we still held responsible for being born this way? We'll talk about that tomorrow. That's kind of where the argument goes from here in the book. But just keep in mind, here's the main thrust of things, is that you cannot earn your way to heaven. It's a gift. And you might have a desire for the idea of a paradise, but you do not have a heart that desires to submit to God's law. And that's why we all need to come to Christ.